No one would believe me if I told them, but for the past 5 years, I have shared my home with a being from another dimension. The first time I saw it, a bluish light pulsed as if it were breathing, passing through the walls of my failed office. My entire body vibrated at a frequency I had never felt before. That encounter changed everything. It transformed my bankruptcy into an inexplicable abundance. Have you ever wondered if we are truly alone in commanding our reality, or if there is an ancient cosmic technology that responds to every thought we emit? Before that meeting, I was the very definition of failure. At 48 years old, I was Robert Navarro, a bankrupt businessman, divorced, and 3 months behind on rent. My consulting firm had closed its doors after losing its 3 biggest clients in quick succession, like dominoes falling in a line I had painstakingly set up over a decade. The walls of my small, rented apartment seemed to close in a little more with each sleepless night. The silence was the worst part. It wasn't a peaceful silence. It was a heavy, accusing silence, filled with the ghosts of unanswered phone calls and the echo of my ex-wife's final words. "You always choose the dream over the family, Robert. What happens when the dream dies?" Well, the dream was dead. Its corpse was a stack of unopened, red-stamped envelopes on my dining table, a makeshift desk littered with the artifacts of my collapse. $1,000 for the rent, a looming payment of $8,000 to the bank for a business loan I could no longer service, and a constellation of smaller debts that, when I dared to add them up, amounted to nearly $20,000. The eviction notice wasn't a threat anymore. It was a promise, tacked to my door a week ago. In 21 days, I would be on the street. My world had shrunk to the size of that dusty apartment. The morning light felt like an intrusion, exposing the dust motes dancing in the air, each one a tiny particle of my shattered life. The smell of stale coffee and fear was my constant companion. I traced the cracks in the ceiling, seeing them as maps of my own wrong turns. My body was a barometer of my despair. A constant, dull pressure in my chest made every breath feel shallow, rationed. Sleep was a stranger I desperately missed. "It's going to be okay," I'd murmur to the empty room, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. My voice was a stranger's, thin and unconvincing. My gaze would inevitably fall upon the framed photograph on the corner of the table. My 2 children, Leo and Maya, smiling on a beach trip from a lifetime ago. They lived with their mother in another state now, a distance that felt both geographical and spiritual. I was a father they spoke to on weekends, a disembodied voice on the phone who always said things were looking up, a lie that grew heavier with each telling. The shame of that lie, of having failed them, was a slow poison. On that specific night, the night that divided my life into a before and an after, I sat on the worn-out sofa, the springs groaning in protest. In my hand, a glass of cheap whiskey, its harsh burn a familiar punishment. The city lights outside my window blurred into a meaningless smear of color. I was contemplating the abyss, not in a dramatic way, but with a tired resignation. The fight had gone out of me. My shoulders were permanently hunched, as if carrying an invisible weight. I looked at my reflection in the dark window pane, a tired man with graying temples, dark circles under his deep-set brown eyes, and a posture of defeat. I barely recognized him. Through the glass, past my own ghostly image, one star in the night sky seemed different from the rest. It wasn't twinkling. It was pulsing, a slow, rhythmic beat of light, like a distant, cosmic heart. It seemed to be calling to me, a single point of serene order in my chaotic universe. For a moment, just a moment, the crushing weight on my chest lifted. I felt a flicker of, not hope, but curiosity, a silent question mark in the vast, indifferent darkness. I didn't know it then, but the universe was not indifferent at all. It was listening, and my life, my very understanding of reality, was about to be broken open and remade forever. I am sharing this story with you now because I know what it feels like to be at the bottom, to think there is no way out. If you've ever felt that weight, please know that you are the reason I am speaking. This channel is new, a small seed I am planting, and my goal is to reach 1,000 people who are ready for a change. Your presence here helps more than you know. If you feel a connection, subscribe, and let me know in the comments what city or country you're watching from. We are not as alone as we think. That pulsing star was a prelude. It was the knock on a door I didn't even know was there. What was about to come through that door was not just a solution to my problems. It was a revelation that would rewrite the very laws of existence as I knew them. It was 3:17 a.m. I remember the exact time because the digital clock on my bedside table was glowing in the oppressive darkness, its red numbers mocking my inability to sleep. But this time, I wasn't awake from anxiety. I was pulled from a shallow, dreamless state by a profound shift in the atmosphere. The low hum of the refrigerator had ceased. The distant city traffic had vanished. A silence, so deep and complete it felt like a physical presence, had enveloped the apartment. Then came the light. It wasn't a sudden flash. It seeped into the room, through the walls, as if the very air itself was beginning to glow. A silver-blue luminescence, like moonlight filtered through deep ocean water, filled every corner of my vision. It didn't cast shadows, it seemed to absorb them. My body reacted before my mind could. A tingling sensation, like a mild electric current, washed over my skin, from the soles of my feet to the roots of my hair. The air grew thick, heavy, almost viscous, and the temperature dropped to a pleasant cool. I tried to sit up, to move, but my limbs wouldn't respond. I was held in place, not by force, but by a perfect, peaceful stillness. And strangely, in the face of this impossible event, I felt no fear. The knot of anxiety that had lived in my chest for years simply dissolved. In the center of the living room, the shimmering light began to gather, to coalesce. It swirled gently, like smoke in a sunbeam, weaving itself into a form. It was vaguely humanoid, but impossibly tall and slender, its proportions fluid and graceful. It had no discernible features, no face, no clothes, just a being of pure, breathing light. Then, 2 points of brilliance intensified within its upper half, opening like eyes. They were not eyes that see, they were eyes that are. Deep, vast, and ancient, they held the light of swirling galaxies. Looking into them felt like looking into infinity. There was no mouth, no need for one. A voice bloomed inside my mind, clear and resonant, neither male nor female, a melody of pure information. Your fear has built prisons that do not exist, the voice said. It wasn't a sound I heard with my ears, but a thought I received with my entire being. What you call reality is merely an echo of your inner state. I tried to speak, to ask, "Who are you? What is this?" But my throat was closed. No sound would come out. My body began to tremble, not from cold or terror, but from awe. My rational mind, the mind of a consultant who dealt in facts and figures, was screaming that this was a dream, a hallucination brought on by stress and whiskey. The being seemed to perceive my inner turmoil. The galactic eyes softened. "You are not losing your mind," the voice continued, its tone gentle, reassuring. "You are finally finding it." As those words settled within me, the light of the entity pulsed, a single, powerful wave of energy that washed through me. It wasn't painful. It felt like a tuning, as if every cell, every atom in my body, was being gently shaken and realigned to a new, harmonious frequency. It was a feeling of homecoming. Then, as suddenly as it had condensed, the form began to dissipate. It didn't vanish. It simply expanded, dissolving back into the air, the light in the room softening until it was gone. But it wasn't truly gone. In the corner of my eye, a subtle presence remained, a faint, almost invisible shimmer in the air, like the heat rising from hot asphalt on a summer day. It was quiet. It was observing. I lay there for what felt like hours, pinned to my bed by the sheer weight of the experience. Like the shimmer of heat rising from asphalt on a blistering summer day, it was a subtle testament that what I had witnessed was not a fantasy. The presence was still here. It was quiet, patient, observing. I sat up, the worn springs of the old mattress barely making a sound. The world outside was beginning to wake up, the distant rumble of a garbage truck, the first bird song. Everything was normal, yet nothing was. The very texture of the silence in my apartment had changed. It was no longer accusing, it was listening. My rational mind, the bankrupt consultant, began its assault immediately. Asterisk hallucination, a stress-induced psychotic break. The cheap whiskey. Asterisk the arguments were logical, familiar, the comfortable armor of a man who believed only in what he could touch and measure. And then, the voice bloomed in my mind again, as clear and calm as a bell ringing in a silent monastery. Your thoughts are living commands for the fabric of reality. It resonated, not as a sound, but as an undeniable knowing. The world does not happen to you. It happens from you. Observe, and prove it to yourself. A surge of irritation, my old, familiar friend, rose up in me. It was a defense mechanism. It was easier to be angry than to be terrified by the sheer scale of what this implied. I got up, walked into the kitchen, and started the ritual of making coffee, my movements jerky and uncertain. The presence in the living room felt like a pair of ancient eyes on my back. I looked at the stack of red stamped envelopes on the table. The eviction notice. The bank loan. $1,000 for the rent, due in a few weeks. But the pressure was immediate. The shame was immediate. All right, I muttered out loud, the words tasting of coffee grounds and defiance. I wasn't speaking to the presence. I was speaking to the absurdity of it all. If my thoughts are commands, if this is real, then I need $1,000 for the rent, and I need it by the end of the day. I said it as a challenge, a dare. It was a prayer born not of faith, but of pure sarcasm, a way to prove to myself that I was, in fact, losing my mind. There was no way. My phone hadn't rung with a client offer in 4 months. My professional network had dried up. I had exhausted every possible avenue. The hours that followed were a quiet torment. I tried to work, opening my laptop only to stare at the blank screen. Every creak of the building, every siren in the distance, made me jump. I was a man waiting for a punchline, for the moment the universe would laugh in my face and confirm my own pathetic delusion. Doubt was a thick fog, rolling back in to reclaim its territory. Asterisk, of course, nothing will happen. You're a fool, Robert. A broke, desperate fool talking to the air. Asterisk, around noon, I gave up trying to be productive. I just sat on the sofa, watching the dust motes dance in the afternoon sun, feeling the old weight begin to settle back onto my chest. Then, my phone buzzed on the table. The sound was so sudden, so violent in the quiet room, that I physically flinched. The screen lit up with a number I didn't recognize, but the area code was local. My heart began a slow, heavy drumbeat against my ribs. It was probably another debt collector. I almost let it go to voicemail. But something, a flicker of that strange curiosity from the night before, made me reach for it. My hand was trembling slightly as I swiped to answer. Hello. My voice was a dry croak. Robert? Robert Navarro? It's Mark Renshaw. The name hit me like a physical blow. Mark Renshaw. He was one of my very first clients, a decade ago. We'd lost touch at least 2 years back after he sold his company and retired, or so I'd heard. Mark, I managed to say, my mind racing. It's been a long time. How are you? I'm good, Robert, I'm good. Listen, this is going to sound completely out of the blue, but I was at lunch with an old colleague, and he was complaining about needing a short-term consultant for a logistics overhaul. A real mess. Your name just popped into my head. I told him you were the best I ever worked with. Are you available for something like that? I couldn't breathe. Yes. I might be. Great. They need someone to start immediately. It's a quick, high-pressure job, maybe 2 weeks, but they pay well. They're prepared to offer a $1,000 advance just for you to come in tomorrow and sign the papers to secure your time. $1,000. The words hung in the air, vibrating with an impossible significance. Time seemed to slow down. I could hear the blood rushing in my ears. I mumbled my agreement, got the contact information, and promised to call them within the hour. When I hung up, my hand fell to my side, the phone feeling impossibly heavy. I stared into space, my mind a complete blank. It was too precise, too perfect, the exact amount, the sudden, improbable solution arriving from a ghost of my past. My gaze drifted to the corner of the room. The air shimmered, and a gentle, bluish light pulsed once, softly. It was a quiet, unassuming acknowledgement. Coincidence, I whispered, the words sounding utterly ridiculous, a child's argument against a tidal wave. I needed it to be a coincidence. The alternative was too vast, too frightening to comprehend. The voice bloomed in my mind again, gentle, patient, and utterly absolute. There are no coincidences, Robert. There are only synchronicities you are yet to comprehend. That night, I didn't drink. I sat in the dark, the $1,000 advance now secured, a confirmation email glowing on my laptop screen. The evidence was real. It was tangible. It was in my bank account. The prison door had been unlocked, not by a key, but by a single, desperate thought wrapped in sarcasm. The first test had been an accident, a challenge born of despair, but it had worked. Now, I knew I had to go further. I had to understand the mechanics of this new reality. I had to design an experiment the universe couldn't possibly dismiss as chance. The next week was a blur of newfound stability. I paid the most pressing portion of my rent. The relief, so profound it felt like a physical weight lifting from my shoulders. I started the consulting gig with Mark's contact, and for the first time in months, I felt the old spark of competence, of purpose. But underneath it all, a silent conversation was always running, a constant dialogue with the shimmering presence in my apartment. I needed to give it a name. It felt too personal, too intimate, to just call it the entity or the voice. One afternoon, I sat on my sofa and asked the question internally. Asterisk, what are you? What do I call you? Asterisk, the name didn't come as a word spoken in my mind. It was more like a symbol, a feeling that translated itself into a sound. Asterisk, Ilix. Asterisk, it felt ancient and new at the same time. It felt right. A few days into this new, tentative reality, Ilix proposed the next step. The first proof came from your desperation. The voice resonated within me. It was a cry in the dark that was answered. But true creation is not a cry. It is a conscious act of tuning. We must conduct an experiment. The word experiment appealed to the consultant in me. It suggested a method, a process, a result that could be measured. Choose something that you believe is impossible, Ilix instructed. But choose something where your own hands cannot consciously interfere. You must learn to receive, not just to grasp. I thought about it for a long time. What was truly impossible? I could try to manifest a winning lottery ticket, but that felt crass, a misuse of this incredible. Whatever this was, I needed a target that was meaningful, something that my old self, the grinder, the hustler, had failed to achieve through sheer force of will. And then it came to me. Multi-tech. Multi-tech, I said out loud. They're a huge player in the tech logistics space. I tried for years to get them as a client. Sent dozens of proposals, made countless calls. I never even got past the executive assistant. They were the one that got away, the failure that stung the most. An excellent choice, Ilix replied. The emotional charge of past failure provides the perfect resistance to overcome. So what do? Just ask for it again. You do not ask, Ilix corrected gently. Asking implies lack. It reinforces the reality that you do not have it. You must tune yourself to the reality where it is already yours. Close your eyes, Robert. I hesitated, then obeyed. I sat back on the sofa, the afternoon sun warming my face through the window. Do not see it as a wish, Ilix guided. Inhabit it. Experience it with every... I felt the texture of the signed contract in my hands, the crisp paper a symbol of my victory. Now, Ilix's voice came, cutting through the vivid daydream. Release it. Let it go completely. This was the hardest part. The instinct was to cling to the vision, to keep pushing the energy at it. But I understood. I had to trust. I pictured myself placing the entire scene into a luminous bubble and letting it float away into the sky, without attachment to the outcome. I unclenched a fist in my soul I hadn't even realized I was making. And now, Ilix concluded, continue living. The next 3 days were a masterclass in managing my own mind. The old Robert, the cynic, was screaming, "Asterisk, what a waste of time. You sat on your couch for 20 minutes pretending. You're a child." Asterisk, the urge to help it along, to find an email for the director, to call a distant acquaintance who might know someone was immense. It was the addict's itch for control. Each time the urge arose, I would look to the corner of the room. The shimmer was always there, a silent reminder to be still, to trust the seed I had planted. So I focused on my current project. I went for walks. I called my kids and had a genuinely good conversation, fully present, not worrying about where my next dollar would come from. I was living. On the afternoon of the third day, my phone rang. An unknown number. Robert Navarro. I answered, my voice steady. "Mr. Navarro, this is Alan Price, Director of Operations at Multitech." My blood turned to ice. My breath caught in my throat. It was the man from my vision. A mutual colleague of ours, James Fitch, mentioned your name at a conference last week. He continued, his voice crisp and professional. He spoke very highly of your work in logistics streamlining. We're in the middle of a rather challenging internal project, and we were wondering if you might be available to discuss it. I leaned against the wall, my knees suddenly weak. I looked at the corner of the room, where the shimmer of Ilix's presence seemed to pulse with a soft, undeniable brilliance. My heart was hammering, a wild drumbeat of disbelief and awe. It wasn't possible. It was too specific, too real. My mind was screaming, "Asterisk, it can't be." Asterisk, and Ilix's voice answered, calm and clear inside my head. "Everything is possible, Robert. You simply learned how to listen to the music and tuned your instrument to its frequency." I had the proof. I had a method. The walls of my old reality were not just unlocked, they were dissolving into dust. And a wild, exhilarating thought took hold of me. If this is real, if this power is available, then everyone needs to know. I was about to learn that some truths are not meant to be shared, not with those who are not ready to hear them. In the weeks that followed, my world transformed at a dizzying pace. The Multitech project was a resounding success, and it led to 2 more contracts with equally prestigious firms. Money was no longer a source of terror. It was simply a form of energy that flowed into my life as needed. I paid off all my smaller debts. I was 3 months ahead on my rent. I could finally buy my children the birthday gifts they deserved, not just the ones I could afford. My posture changed. The permanent hunch in my shoulders, the posture of a man carrying the world, began to straighten. I started to recognize the man in the mirror again. This wasn't just about money. It was about a fundamental shift in my relationship with reality. I began to see Ilix's teachings everywhere. A thought about an old friend would lead to a random text from them an hour later. A sudden urge to take a different route home would help me avoid a massive traffic jam. The universe was constantly communicating, and I was finally learning its language. It was a language of feeling, of intuition, of synchronicity. The joy and wonder were so immense. I felt they would burst out of me if I didn't share them. I thought of who I could tell, who might possibly understand. And my mind landed on my older brother, Henry. He had always been my rock, the pragmatic, sensible one who had lent me money more times than I could count during my downward spiral. He deserved to know the reason for my sudden turnaround. He deserved to share in this miracle. I invited him to dinner at a restaurant I never could have afforded 2 months earlier. The clinking of glasses and the low hum of conversation felt like the soundtrack to my new life. Henry looked at me across the table, his expression a mixture of relief and cautious curiosity. "You look good, Rob," he said, taking a sip of his wine. "Really good. This new contract must be something special." "It is," I said, my heart starting to beat a little faster. "But it's more than that. Something happened. Something changed everything." I started slowly, trying to ease him in. I talked about changing my mindset, about the power of focus and positive thinking. He nodded along, a familiar, slightly patronizing smile on his face. He'd heard this stuff from self-help gurus before. "That's great, Rob. I'm glad you found a system that works for you," he said, as if I'd just discovered a new brand of coffee. I took a deep breath. There was no other way. I had to tell him the whole truth. "It's not a system, Henry. It's a presence, a guide. I've had contact with a being, an entity. Not from here." Henry's smile froze. He put his wine glass down with a soft, deliberate click. He stared at me, his eyes searching my face for a sign that I was joking. He found none. "I call him Ilix," I continued, my voice dropping to a near whisper. "He's made of light. He communicates with me in my mind. He's the one who taught me how this all works, how our inner state creates our reality. The multi-tech contract, the other clients. I didn't get them by luck. I created them." The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating. The cheerful noise of the restaurant seemed to fade into a distant buzz. Henry's expression had shifted from concern to genuine alarm. He slowly reached across the table and placed his hand on top of mine. It wasn't a gesture of connection. It was the gesture of someone trying to calm a hysterical patient. "Robert," he said, his voice low and serious, "you've been under an unbelievable amount of stress. The bankruptcy, the divorce. It's enough to break anyone. People sometimes see things, hear things. It's a trauma response. You're having hallucinations, brother." "It's not a hallucination, Henry. It's real. How do you explain all this?" I gestured around the expensive restaurant. "Where do you think this money came from?" "Luck. A good contact from your past. Coincidence," he said, listing off the very words I had used before I knew better. His eyes were filled with a deep, pitying sadness that was 1,000 times more painful than anger. "Aliens teaching you the secrets of wealth? Seriously? Listen to yourself. You need to talk to a professional, a therapist. I can help you find someone." The wall between us went up, thick and impenetrable. He was looking at his broken, traumatized little brother, while I was looking at a man trapped in a prison he couldn't see. We were living in two completely different realities, speaking two different languages. The drive home was the loneliest I had felt since my encounter with Ilix. The joy I'd felt was replaced by a profound sense of isolation. I had crossed a threshold, and I couldn't go back. But no one from my old world could come with me. When I walked into my apartment, the shimmer in the corner was waiting. It felt like a lighthouse in a storm. I sank onto the sofa, the weight of my brother's disbelief heavy on my heart. "They cannot see what they are not ready to see." Ilix's voice filled my mind, a balm on a raw wound. Their reality is built on a foundation of limitation. To accept your truth would be to shatter their own. This does not diminish your truth, Robert. It only defines your path. In that moment, a quiet resolve settled over me. I finally understood. I couldn't pull people into my new reality. I couldn't convince them with words. The only proof that mattered was the life I was building. The world could call it luck, coincidence, or even madness. I would know the truth. My journey had to be a silent one. But as I looked at the remaining pile of bills on my table, I knew there was still one piece of my old life that luck could never fix. The biggest debt, the deepest wound, the looming threat against the only real legacy my family had. The bank was closing in on my parents' beach house, and I was about to face a test that would require more than a lucky phone call. It would demand nothing less than a miracle. The successes with Multitech and the other firms were like controlled burns, clearing away the dead undergrowth of my old life. But the forest fire was still looming. That fire had a name: foreclosure. The bank's letters were no. The shimmer of Elix's presence was calm, steady, unperturbed by the panic rising in my chest. "This is it," I said, my voice tight. "This is the final test, isn't it? The one that feels truly impossible. Every wall feels solid until you find the door." Elix's voice resonated within me. "You are still seeing the wall, Robert. You are not yet looking for the door." "There is no door, Elix. $80,000 in 10 days. It's a dead end." "You still think in terms of getting," the voice corrected, with infinite patience. "You believe the money is out there, and you must somehow pull it in here. That is the illusion of separation. You do not need to get anything. You only need to align with the reality where the problem is already solved." The instruction was simple, yet it felt like being asked to grow wings. So what do I do? The same process as with multi-tech, but bigger. The process is the same. The only thing that has changed is the size of your doubt. Elix replied. "You have learned the notes. Now, you must play the symphony without looking at the sheet music. You must trust your hands. Apply what you have learned, but this time, without the anchor of doubt." For the next 3 nights, I turned my apartment into a sanctuary. I unplugged the television, silenced my phone, and sat on my sofa in the deepening twilight. The world outside, with its sirens and its deadlines, faded into a distant hum. There was only the quiet room and the soft, pulsing light in the corner. I didn't focus on the $80,000. The number itself was a symbol of lack, a monument to the problem. Instead, following Elix's guidance, I focused on the feeling of the solution. I closed my eyes, and I wasn't in my city apartment anymore. I was at the beach house. I felt the cool, worn wood of the front door key in my hand. I smelled the air, thick with salt and jasmine from the overgrown bushes my mother had planted. I heard the familiar creak of the 3rd step on the porch. I walked through the rooms not as a visitor, but as the owner, free and clear. I ran my hand along the dusty wooden mantelpiece where photos of my parents still sat. I felt the specific lumpy spring in the old armchair by the window. I looked out that window and saw the waves crashing, a timeless rhythm that had nothing to do with banks or clocks. And then, I breathed in the emotion. Not just relief. It was deeper than that. It was a profound, bone-deep gratitude. A quiet, unshakable peace. I felt the security of knowing this place, this legacy, was safe. I felt the joy of imagining my own children running on that same beach, their feet sinking into the wet sand just as mine had. I inhabited this feeling for hours. Whenever the panic tried to creep back in the cold thought of the deadline, the sharp image of a foreclosure sign, I didn't fight it. I acknowledged it. And then I gently returned my focus to the sound of the waves, the smell of the salt, the feeling of peace in my chest. I was choosing my reality, breath by breath. I was learning to hold a state of being, regardless of the evidence to the contrary. On the morning of the 4th day, I woke up feeling a strange sense of calm. The deadline was now only 6 days away, but the panic was gone. It had been replaced by a quiet, alert stillness. A feeling of expectation, without attachment. I went about my day, working on the multi-tech project. Around noon, an email landed in my inbox. The subject line was innocuous: Property Inquiry Coastal Region. I almost deleted it, assuming it was spam. But some intuition, some gentle nudge, made me open it. The email was from a high-end international events company. They were organizing an exclusive, month-long corporate retreat for a tech giant and were scouting for a private, secluded beachfront property. They had seen an old real estate listing for my parents' house and wanted to know if it might be available for a 3-month rental, starting immediately. My heart began to beat a slow, heavy drum against my ribs. They said they understood it was an unusual request and were prepared to be generous. They needed an answer within 48 hours. I scrolled to the bottom of the email, my hand trembling as I moved the mouse. And then I saw the number. The figure they were offering, to be paid in full, up front, to secure the location. $90,000. I pushed my chair back from the desk and stood up, my legs unsteady. I looked at my hands. They were shaking, not from fear or anxiety, but from a profound, earth-shattering reverence. It was the tremor of a man who had just witnessed the impossible made real. The fabric of my reality had not just been bent, it had been rewoven before my very eyes. That evening, I signed the rental agreement. The wire transfer confirmation arrived an hour later. The problem wasn't just solved. It had been erased from existence. I sat on my sofa, the glow from my laptop screen illuminating my face. In the corner, the shimmering light of Ilix pulsed, brighter and more vibrant than I had ever seen it. It seemed to fill the entire room with a soft, blue luminescence. It was not I. The voice came, gentle but clear in the sacred silence of the room. It was you. You finally understood your own power. You stopped shouting at the storm and simply became the harbor. The 6 months that followed were like living in a different dimension that just happened to look like my old world. The beach house was saved, my debts were cleared, and my consulting business was flourishing beyond anything I had ever managed in my previous life. I moved out of the cramped, water-stained apartment and into a new place with clean lines, minimalist furniture, and large windows that let the sunlight pour in. The change wasn't just external. The frantic energy of the hustler, the man constantly chasing the next client, the next dollar, had been replaced by a deep, resonant calm. Opportunities didn't need to be hunted down, they simply arrived. I was no longer pushing the river. I was the river. I began to see the synchronicities everywhere, like a hidden language that was now being spoken clearly. I'd think of a problem in a client's logistics chain, and the solution would appear in the headline of a magazine I randomly picked up. I'd feel a sudden urge to call an old colleague, and they'd answer by saying, "I was just about to call you." Reality felt less like a solid, unyielding thing and more like a responsive fluid, a dance partner moving in perfect time with my inner state. One night, I was standing on the balcony of my new apartment, looking up at the star-dusted sky. The air was cool and crisp. For the first time since my initial encounter, I felt a shift in Ilix's presence. It was no longer a subtle shimmer confined to a corner. The energy was gathering, coalescing. I turned around. There, in the center of my living room, Ilix stood fully formed. The elongated, humanoid shape of silver-blue light was clearer, more defined than ever before. The two eyes, like miniature galaxies, held a depth that felt both ancient and immediate. The light it emitted was soft but palpable, warming my skin. "The time has come for the final truth, Robert." Ilix's voice filled my mind. The transmission was clearer, more powerful than ever. "You have mastered the technique. Now you must understand the principle. The universe does not respond to what you want." I was confused. "But it has," I countered, thinking of the rent money, the multi-tech contract, the beach house. Everything I focused on, everything I inhabited, has manifested. An accurate observation of the effect, but a misunderstanding of the cause. Ilix continued. "Imagine a grand piano. It has the potential to play any music, but it plays nothing on its own. Your thoughts, your visualizations, they are like a finger choosing a key to press. They are the instruction, but they are not the music." The entity paused, letting the image settle in my mind. "The music," Ilix's voice resonated, "is the vibration of the string. It is the feeling. It is your state of being. The universe does not respond to the finger pointing at the key. It responds to the resonance of the string after it has been struck. It responds to who you are." In that instant, 1,000 disparate puzzle pieces clicked into place. It was a moment of profound, blinding clarity. The techniques, the visualizations, the sensory immersions. They weren't magic spells. They were tools. They were exercises designed for one purpose and one purpose only: to change my internal state, to shift my own frequency. It wasn't about projecting a desire outward. It was about cultivating a reality inward until the outside world had no choice but to match it. The internal voice was quieter, less a distinct guide, and more a gentle echo of my own deepest intuition. It wasn't a sad or alarming change. It felt natural, like the scaffolding being removed from a building that can now stand on its own. One morning, as I sat meditating, I felt the presence gather its energy one last time. It was a faint, gentle pulse. "Do you still need me, Robert?" the voice asked. It was a genuine question. I took a deep, slow breath, feeling into the truth of my own being. I felt the unshakable calm that had become my new foundation. I felt the quiet confidence, the knowledge that the power I had witnessed was not on loan, but was my own inherent nature. "No," I answered internally, with a heart full of gratitude, not dismissal. "Not like before." "Then my purpose is fulfilled," Ilix replied. The light in the room swirled gently, a slow vortex of silver-blue particles. "I was never truly separate from you. Think of me as a reflection of a part of your own consciousness you were finally ready to meet. A catalyst, a reminder of what you already were." The light began to dissolve, not vanishing, but seemingly reabsorbing into the very air of the room. As the last of the shimmer faded, something remained. On the polished surface of my wooden desk, where moments before there had been nothing, now sat a small, smooth stone. It was a deep, crystalline blue, and it seemed to have captured the light within it, emitting a soft, faint luminescence that pulsed with a slow, steady heartbeat. "So you remember," were the last words I heard from Ilix, fading into a profound and complete silence. "The light you saw in me has always been inside of you." Today, 2 years have passed since that morning. My life is unrecognizable from the desperate, broken state I was in. I now lead a thriving consulting group that has expanded into new sectors, generating over $8 million in revenue last year. I wrote a book, sharing the principles though not the source of this internal technology for entrepreneurs, and it has become a national bestseller. I live in a state of constant, flowing abundance, not just financially, but in my relationships, my health, and my peace of mind. The blue crystal sits on my desk. It isn't a talisman. It holds no magical power. I don't use it to ask for things or to channel some external force. It is simply a mirror. Each morning, I pick it up. I feel its smooth, cool surface in my palm, and I watch the soft, internal light pulse in time with my own breath. It reminds me. It reflects the truth I almost died without ever knowing, that the architect of my reality, the source of all creation, was never in the heavens or in some distant dimension. It was, and always has been, waiting patiently behind my own eyes. It has always been with all of us. Sometimes, in the deep quiet of the pre-dawn hours, when the city is just a soft hum beneath my window, I hold the crystal. I don't go to it for answers or to ask for guidance. I go to it to listen to the silence that it represents. In its cool, smooth weight, I feel the anchor of my own being. In its soft, blue, pulsing light, I see a reflection of the calm that now lives where a storm of fear once raged. I often wonder how many others there are. How many people, sitting in their own quiet rooms around the world, have received a similar visitation. Perhaps it wasn't a being of light named Ilix. Perhaps it was a sudden, inexplicable insight during a walk in the woods. A line in a book that rearranged their entire understanding of reality. A dream so vivid it left an imprint on their waking world. Maybe these catalysts take whatever form we are most ready to accept. For a hardened, skeptical businessman like I was, perhaps it needed to be something as undeniable and strange as an interdimensional being. For another, it might be the whisper of intuition, the shape of a cloud, the pattern of leaves on the ground. The universe, I've learned, has an infinite vocabulary. The blue light of Ilix no longer appears in the corner of my room. But sometimes, when I am in a state of deep flow, completely absorbed in my work or simply watching the sunset, I feel it. It's not a presence outside of me anymore. It's a resonance inside me. It's a warmth that spreads through my chest, a feeling of absolute certainty and connection, a quiet hum that reminds me of the cosmic piano Ilix described. The string is vibrating. The music is playing. The fear I lived with for so long was a noise, a constant, frantic static that filled every available space in my consciousness. It screamed of lack, of deadlines, of failure, of not enough. It was so loud that it was impossible to hear anything else. It became the only music I knew, and so my world danced to its chaotic rhythm. Now, the music is different. The foundational note is silence, and from that silence, everything else arises with effortless grace. The fear was a desperate pushing. This new state is a conscious allowing. Scarcity was a prison I built with my own beliefs. Infinite flow is simply my natural state, rediscovered. And you who have listened to my story this far, I invite you to do something with me, right now, just for a moment. Close your eyes, if you feel comfortable. Take one slow, deep breath. Feel the air enter your body, and as you exhale, let go of the tension in your shoulders, in your jaw. Just be still. Notice the silence beneath the noise around you, the space between your thoughts. In that space, there is a quiet hum, a feeling of simple presence. That is the beginning of the language. That is the frequency of your true self, waiting patiently beneath the static of your daily concerns. Have you ever had a thought that seemed to come from nowhere, a sudden intuition that saved you from a mistake? Have you ever experienced a coincidence so perfect, so impossibly timed, that it felt like the universe was winking at you? Those weren't accidents. They were not random fluctuations in a chaotic world. They were signals. They were echoes of a power that already lives within you, a quiet intelligence that is always orchestrating, always aligning, always waiting for you to recognize it. I learned to live by a new code, a simple set of truths that became my internal operating system. They are the words I return to when the old world and its noisy fears try to reclaim their hold. I am the signal. The universe is the echo. My state of being is the cause. My life is the effect. My inner world is the blueprint. This outer world is the reflection. This is the technology. This is the great secret that was never a secret at all. It is the fundamental law of consciousness. And it leaves me with one final, lingering question. A question that I now live with every day, not as a problem to be solved, but as a wonder to be explored. What if the reality you are so desperately trying to change is nothing more than a memory? A persistent echo of a state of being you have already outgrown? What if the only thing required to step into a new world is to simply stop giving life to the old one? The universe is never silent. You just have to learn how to listen. Thank you for sharing this time with me. This journey, as you can imagine, can be a solitary one, and sharing it means more than you know. This channel is a new venture for me, a way to pass on what I've learned, and every single one of you who subscribes helps us reach our first goal of 1,000 people on this path together. If my story resonated, I'd love to hear about your own experiences with synchronicity in the comments below. Let me know what city or country you're watching from. And if you'd like to continue this exploration with me, please subscribe. There is so much more to uncover.